Hello and welcome to Mashmouth, a podcast covering every single episode of the hit 1970 sitcom MASH. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Vanessa.
Vanessa, we don't have much to discuss in the way of opening topics this week, so how about we just kind of get into this episode right away?
I am all for that.
Okay. So, in this episode, The Chosen People, a Korean family crashes the camp, claiming that the 4077th is on their land. Frank is an absolute ass about everything while trying to sort things out. And at the same time, a young Korean woman comes from a local village claiming that Radar is the father of her child. Vanessa, what did you think of this episode?
So I really enjoyed this episode. It has the classic MASH feel, even though it's a little bit different than all the other classic-y MASH episodes to me. I thought that it was funny. I thought that the commentary was pretty on point. Like you said, Frank was a complete ass in this episode, and that I felt was really commentary on some stuff. I thought it was well handled because it was rebutted by Hawkeye and Trapper in a very funny way. Yeah, I enjoyed this episode a lot.
Yeah, this one is very solid. I didn't think it was a remarkable one, but I enjoyed it. I liked how the two plots in it, the kind of A and B story, weren't really that related. She wasn't really from this family, I think. It was just kind of another thing happening while this other stuff was going on. And I always think that's interesting that they kind of do these two storylines that aren't necessarily intersecting. And yeah, Frank is the worst in this one, the absolute worst in a very real way. And it was I don't even find this funny. It's just kind of too real. And Radar thinking that he's the father of this child, I thought was really sweet, how he kind of grew to like this kid more.
I think I said this to you before we started recording, but I know that we sometimes are oh, Frank's kind of nice in this episode, or I like Frank in this episode. But so many times, this is the type of episode that I'm oh yeah, Frank Burns sucks, and this is why, because he's just a bad person. This is why Hawkeye and Trapper don't like him. This is why he's such a shitty guy. And yeah, this just reminded me how much I hate Frank Burns. But that being said, also, I really liked how Radar grew to like this child, and it was a really sweet episode. And also the baby was really cute.
Yes. No, this was they handled this illegitimate child storyline and made it really cute for Radar. They kind of pulled that off very well. But like you said, Frank is the absolute worst in this one. So let's get into that a little bit. Because after a opening scene with the credits of Radar doing the bugle call and then somebody egging his face, which I thought was a really funny visual, we go into the OR, and Pac, who we saw in the episode with the poker game, is teaching Hawkeye Korean. And Frank is just being the worst man alive and being why are you doing that? How dare you even attempt to learn the language of the land that we're in? It was just disgusting in my opinion.
And Hawkeye says that too. He's Frank, we're in Korea. We might as well learn the language, or at least try, because we'll know later on. But, not knowing any basics of the language to interact with the local people is very, not good. It makes them run into a lot of problems. And we've seen that in the past episodes too. So I really liked how Pac was trying to teach them, but it was also funny because Hawkeye was butchering the Korean. And it was good. But then also, after Hawkeye said we might as well try to learn the language, Frank was I speak American. It's just that's so stupid. That is just so dumb. And he's I can go anywhere in the world.
That was the most xenophobic thing that I think that Frank has really kind of been so far. This kind of just guy who does exist in the real world of no, I don't need to adapt at all. I'm an American. I'm better than everyone else in the world, even though I'm in this foreign country and, should make an effort to do right by them. It's, again, felt too real. it felt too real to be, like, funny.
And it felt too real because unfortunately we're still like dealing with this today. Like this is a very 21st century problem as well, because I've heard from so many people who are not from America that when Americans come to their country, they act like the world revolves around America and Americans. And it's just like, it kind of doesn't. Like, you're not in America anymore. I don't know. It was like super weird. And also, that Frank is definitely the type of person to hear people speaking any other language besides English in America and like yell at them, because that's the kind of like jerk he is.
I find it very funny that they're doing this kind of like commentary joke in the 70s when I feel like that still happens so much now, like you were saying, of just people being like, I'm an American, I'm holier than thou, get out of my way, figure it out for me. And I'm like, great. But this scene does a really great job of setting up the actual conflict of the episode with the family coming in. Because like you said, the fact that they cannot communicate with the Koreans, like, plays in really well. And even the short scene before this with Radar being egged in the face kind of sets up that, like, Radar's not where he wants to be in life either. Like, people don't respect him. It's very, like, short and, like, very concise and very, like, funny in its own way. But I like how they were able to take these two very brief ideas and expand them out throughout the course of the episode.
Yeah, and then we get the family that shows up. And first of all, we get introduced to them by a cow walking into Henry's tent, and that was hysterical. I loved that so much.
That was really funny because how freaked out he was. Like, it was just like a cow standing there, and he was like, this thing is going to murder me. This thing is going to eat me in my sleep or whatever. Like, he was fully freaking out and like, Radar! It was really funny.
It was really funny. And I'll read out what our what our outline says. So Ethan did this outline. He said, the family showing up at the camp. Hilarious white people trying to communicate with foreigners by yelling at them. Gag ensues. And I have thoughts about this because Henry was like trying to communicate with these people who were setting up their house and like trying to till the land and whatnot to farm, because we find out later that the 4077 they believed was like their farmland before the war started, which is like so sad. Like that it wasn't played as very sad, but if you think about it, that's like terribly sad.
And that happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know it was supposed to be like a funny gag, but I've never found it funny in shows where people like use English, like mess up English words to like try to speak in another language, because Henry is like goey homey, and it's just like, don't do that. I don't know. It's just like so stupid.
When I wrote hilarious white people yelling at foreigners gag, I meant that sarcastically.
No, I know you did.
Okay, I'm just making sure that people at home know. But yeah, once again, it's the kind of gag that is a little too real. There are too many people that like do this of like, well, they don't speak my language, so I'm gonna like revert to English baby talk to try to communicate with. Like, that's not how language works. That's never like going to work. If they don't understand English, they're not gonna like go like, oh, you were yelling at me, so I figure it out with the Tower Babel in my head. But yeah, it was it like wasn't bad on its own terms. Like, I get what they was doing, and it's like not an actual problem with the episode, but it like reminded me too much of like real people who are just kind of ignorant and kind of like just frustrated very easily, yelling at other people for not knowing how to speak English, even though they're in Korea.
Yeah, and like Frank is the same way in this scene too, because like he was like screaming at this Korean family. It's just like, we've already established that they don't know English. Please stop. And he, especially because Captain Pak is there, like Pak knows
Pak
Korean.
Can communicate.
Like, just go get him. Why are you even like trying this? I don't know. So Frank starts screaming at this family, and the family, the father starts like yelling back. It's just like, yeah, Frank, okay, do you know Korean? Like, did you think that they were just suddenly gonna know English? Like, just how you suddenly know Korean? Screw you, Frank Burns.
What if they started doing Korean baby talk? Would that help you? But also, Frank like threatens to shoot this family which is absolutely insane.
And a war crime.
Yeah. He says, like, oh, we're going to shoot shots over their head. That'll get them running. And he's, like, smirking and being like, ha ha ha. But, like, Henry's like, are you trying to start a war incident in the middle of another war? Which, just, like, come on, man. This is, like, Frank at his... We say it every time that Frank is, like, garbage. But this is one where he just really got on my nerves.
I thought it was very funny how Henry was, like, kind of big mad at Frank. He calls him a dumb dodo because Frank kind of, like, got the father of the family, like, riled up. And Henry was like, I was handling it before you were here. Like, what is wrong with you? And yeah, I really didn't like how Frank was just like, yeah, we're like, they're fighting in the Korean War for supposedly the Korean people. And Frank is just being such an asshole about it. Like, yeah, you're here to help these people, allegedly, and this is how you're treating the people that you're supposed to be here to help. I don't know. It was just so nasty and gross.
Sorry, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Sorry we're so angry about these fictional
like,
people.
We enjoyed this episode. Like, I really like this episode, like I said at the top, but like there were so many, and of course I do like how Frank is such a piece of shit in this episode.
Yeah,
because
it's like functional.
Yeah, because it's like commentary about the war and people's like xenophobic views about the war that America is fighting in. And of course, like, it's rebuffed. Like, Frank is clearly in the wrong here. Like, everybody is just like, shut up, Frank. Like, you're such an idiot. And I do like that.
Yeah, and it helps that this kind of is the background element of the episode as time goes on. Like, it definitely shifts focus to Radar with this child, which I guess we should get into. I thought that this storyline was really sweet. So it starts with this woman coming in, like, carrying a child, and she tells, well, first of all, she can speak English, unlike the family, so she's kind of from a separate part of Korea. She tells Henry that the father of this child is a G.I. Joe from the 4077, and the way that she describes the father, Henry's immediately like, oh, that's either Hawkeye or Trapper, which I thought was really great.
I thought that was really funny. I loved this part where, like, immediately his mind just goes to Hawkeye or Trapper because she's like, oh, he spoke so nice to me and this, that, and the other thing. And so immediately Henry's like, ah, yes, one of my dog captains seduced this poor girl. And now she's got a baby.
Just so funny. And, you know, he calls in Hawkeye and Trapper, and, like, Pac shows up, and she's just like, oh, that's not the father, and, like, blah, blah, blah. But then Radar, like, just kind of comes in with, like, the reports, and she's like, oh, that's the father. And he's like, what?
Completely blindsided that Radar could possibly be the dad of anybody. And it was really funny because Hawkeye and Trapper were just like, yeah, good for you, Radar. You're getting some.
You did it. Confirmed non-virgin. Let's go.
I have this in my notes. I said, LOL, basically Radar fucks.
But it's revealed that he doesn't, but he tries to pretend like he does, which is like a funny conflict for him to have. Of like, well, I could be the father, even though definitely cannot be. Like, he's too prideful to just say like, oh, I've never done it, which is such like a dude thing when you're like at 19 of like, oh, well, yeah, that could happen. I definitely could be the father.
I am definitely sexually active, guys. It's really funny because they decide that they're going to do like a blood test against like the mom's blood and Radar's blood. And I was like, this is crazy to me because that is such an imperfect paternity test, but I guess it's like the only thing that they had really at the time. Like, that was really the only way that they could potentially even rule Radar out because, you know, chances are the baby may have the same blood type as Radar. Doesn't mean that he's necessarily like the dad. But yeah, I thought that this was like time period kind of thing of just like, well, that's not perfect, but okay, I guess. Yeah.
Like, they take Radar's blood type and they take the mother's blood type, and they're like, oh, they eventually find out that the baby has like a different blood type. And I guess that's the best you could do in the 50s before you had like DNA testing technology like they do now. But it definitely doesn't feel like it rules out and like anybody for being the father. The only thing that fully rules it out is the fact that Radar hasn't had sex ever. If it was a little more ambiguous, there would still be like a chance that he's the dad because genetics are weird. But I like that he throughout this episode has like two things going on, that he starts liking this child and like wanting to protect him because he's like, oh, cute baby, and it's possible, well, not mine, but like I want to act like it's mine. And then he's also like kind of enjoying the like little bit of cool factor that he has now of like people thinking that he's like had sex before, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, I didn't really like get that in watching the episode until the very end. So like you do see Radar, eating with Chunhee, which is the mother's name. You see him eating with her in the mess tent, and he's like playing with the baby, holding the baby while she eats, stuff like that. It's like a very sweet thing. And by the end, like you see that Radar does really like this baby. He's like very attached. And so he says like, oh, no, I lied. I am the father and stuff like that, of course. But he's been ruled out as the dad and whatnot. And I didn't really get it until the end when he's talking with Hawkeye of like basically admitting that he's a virgin, that he kind of just like liked that people thought that he wasn't a virgin. And I was like, oh, well, that makes that like less sweet, I guess.
No, it's like a combination.
Yeah, I just wasn't seeing the cues for it in the beginning of the episode when he's in the mess tent and people are like giggling about it. I don't know. It was like a very weird thing.
They're like patting him on the back, being like, hey, boy, you did it. Which is like a weird thing, but like, I don't know, that like happens to some people. Who knows?
I guess, yeah.
And then this is like skipping ahead, but at like the very end, there's like a nurse or somebody who comes by saying like, yo, Radar, want to go to the movies tonight? Because I guess the fact that she thinks that he's had sex before is like, oh, so he's like a viable option now. That's pretty cool. Which is the weirdest way to get hit on.
That is kind of weird. But I did think that again, this is at the end of the episode when we find out that, of course, like Radar is not the dad. But the conversation that he has with Hawkeye, basically telling him that he is a virgin, it was really, really wholesome and really sweet for Radar's character, because he was so like shy about it and kind of like upset about it. And Hawkeye was like, don't worry, like you're a catch. Like Radar is clearly a very like nice guy. He was willing to take responsibility for this child and stuff like that. Clearly he's going to find a girlfriend who will like want to copulate with him.
Oh, she copulate, Vanessa, my goodness. We're gonna have to tag this explicit just for that.
Not me saying Radar fucks, but
no, I feel I like this little conversation that he had with Hawkeye as well. Just the fact that he's like, it'll happen. Like, don't worry about it. Like, don't make a big deal about these things. Is like really nice advice to like give to a kid. I really enjoyed Hawkeye throughout this whole episode because he's not really the focus like he tends to be. This is kind of on Radar. And even like when you go back to the like family stuff, like it doesn't really involve Hawkeye much. It's more Frank bumbling about it. But the little bit of that we get of Hawkeye in this one's like really good. Like it kind of confirms good guy character once again.
Yeah, and also on the note about Radar, I kind of forget how young Radar is supposed to be in this show. Like, that he is supposed to only be, like, right out of high school. You know, he got his GED, basically, in an episode in season 1. Like, all this kind of stuff is just, like, it's so crazy to me because, like, sometimes I do forget that Radar is just a really inexperienced kid. And even though he's really good at his job at the 4077, he is just, like, a baby, basically. And he's at war. And it's just, like, it's so sad.
It's definitely something that you kind of have to suspend your disbelief in. It's very kind of clear that, like, Gary Berghoff is not so much a young man these days. Like, he is kind of clearly aging out of the role and will continue to do so for his remainder on the series. But, like, you just gotta have the idea in the back of your head that, like, Radar is a young kid.
Yeah, and not even so much Gary Berghoff as an actor aging, but just because Radar is so competent at his job, like, at least, again, for me, I forget because Radar is just so good at what he does, that he is a really inexperienced kid in other ways. And I like when the show reminds me of that.
That's true. And there's been so many virgin jokes this season. This is like the
Yes.
culmination of all of them. So like, you know, clearly the writers are trying to remind you quite a lot that he's a young, innocent babe in the woods.
Yes, definitely. So again, as we said, Frank is like, for some reason, he is so appalled by the fact that there's like Korean people in his presence in Korea. So while Henry and Hawkeye and Trapper are kind of dealing with this radar situation, Henry is like, yeah, Frank, if it's such a big deal to you that these Korean people are in our camp, you deal with them. Like, you get on the phone with civilian affairs, you make them leave, basically. You can do it. And so Frank does. And of course, it's like, he gets the civilian affairs people to like come take them on a truck, and Hawkeye and Trapper are like, they're not going anywhere unless we know where that truck is going. Like, we don't know what's going to happen to these people, and we are too good of people to let you just like go off and potentially like harm these people.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really funny also that not funny, it was so annoying that Frank, he was talking to Pac and he was saying, like, these are your people. They should be basically like kissing the ground that we walk on. Like, these lucky refugees are going to be resettled and this, that, and the other thing. It's just like, who are you? Like, yeah, I'm so sure that the Korean people are very lucky that, you know, the United States and the Soviet Union are fighting a proxy war on their fucking farming land.
Jeez, we're getting like legit angry in this one.
No, but even so, it's just like, it was so true, because Pac was also giving him pushback about this of like, yeah, great, you're doing such a good job. And we know from history that in the Korean War, the 38th parallel did not move from the start to the finish. So there was such unnecessary bloodshed, because for what reason? And that was so, in this episode, it was very subtle, I felt. Like, of course, this was also commentary about the Vietnam War of like, basically, why are we here? This like, why are we fighting this war type of commentary? And I thought that it was very well done with like the Korean War aspect paralleling the Vietnam War aspect. And yeah, I just thought that it was well done. And also, they end up being fine in the end, this Korean family. Yeah. So that's good.
Hang on, I can say something. Give me a second to like organize my brain.
So I know I just like threw so much stuff at you all at once.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I was so angry at this episode. Like, not this episode, but just Frank.
You're angry at the characters within this episode for behaving how they were, not the production of the episode.
No.
Like you said, this is like pretty well done for what it's trying to do. Like, yeah, they probably could have shown a little bit more of the family, like, you know, humanize them a little bit more rather than just kind of be like these weird guys who show up and like
this inconvenience for the camp. Yeah,
the kids like asking for a shoe shine, which I thought was like funny that he was just always going, giving you a shoe shine whether you liked it or not, and you're gonna pay him $1. Which was like pretty funny, but like for what it was trying to do, like not getting too heavy in it, I thought like pretty well handled. Also, I know this wouldn't happen. I know this is not how things actually work. But they are a mobile hospital, aren't they? That's what MASH stands for. So in theory, they could just move. I know they wouldn't. Sure, that couldn't happen logistically. But like, guys show up claiming that you're on his land? Hey, why not move the mobile hospital?
Move down the road, guys.
Just do that. Easy solution.
I also liked in this episode that when we find out that Radar is not the dad of this child, Chun-hee kind of, I guess, comes clean to Pac and says, you know, the real father left her and she was ostracized from her family. And I think I covered this in a couple episodes back, but women who had half Korean, half American children were actually ostracized from their communities and their families and stuff because they were looked on as like sex workers. And so this was like very realistic that her family would have like ostracized her. Unfortunately, like that's obviously a bad thing. But then to bring it back to like something lighter, when the family gets resettled, they take Chunhee with them. So it's just like, I like how they kind of like adopted her into their family. And it seemed like just like a really
That
like
is
sweet
nice.
wrap up. Yeah, I
Yeah.
liked that a lot. I don't know if that would actually happen, but I did really like that.
Honestly, kind of the ending to the family storyline kind of, for me, came very abruptly. They do track it throughout the episode, but it went from, like, Frank being, like, incompetent on the phone talking to this guy who apparently hits on him, which I thought was, like, a weird gag.
I loved that. I thought that was really funny.
No, it was funny, but it, like, I was not expecting that kind of
Oh,
gag.
yeah, no. Me neither.
But it kind of goes from him being like, incompetent to suddenly they have a truck and they're leaving, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that's the end of that. But yeah, I like how they do wrap that up too. And I loved when Chunhee comes clean. She tells Pac that the reason why she said Radar was the father, that he was like legitimately just very kind to her. I love that. I love that it made Radar be like this genuinely sweet guy who's kind of like deserving of love. It wrapped up his storyline really well, that like he was chosen for the father, not at random, like not like, oh, I just saw this kid, he's gonna be the father of my child now. It was, he's a sweet guy, and if however this works out, I'm sure that he would take care of us. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I liked how it all wrapped up as well.
So, Vanessa, with all that said, do you have trivia for us?
I do. So I don't have a ton of data about how much land was like taken from the Korean people like we saw in this episode, but I do have some data about land used by Americans during the war period and then beyond. So in 2020, the US relinquished its control of 12 military sites to the South Korean government, making up over 12 acres of land, and some of it in the heart of Seoul. This agreement was initially reached in 2002, but it didn't officially happen until 2020. So that just goes to show like how long America has like been in this situation, and also like the long-lasting effects of the Korean War.
That's crazy. It took 18 years.
Yeah, I know. Also, fun fact, Camp Humphreys, which is located in South Korea, is the United States' largest overseas military base, but that was fortunately opened and made in conjunction with the South Korean government. So I just thought that was like a cool fun fact.
Cool. Love to hear some good cooperative stuff.
So also, I also have some trivia on the actress Claire Terreo. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that completely wrong. She played Chunhee in this episode. Her acting career was most prolific in the 70s and 80s. She had small parts in movies, including Cujo, 48 Hours, and this movie called Cobra. She is yet another MASH alum that was a guest star in Trapper John MD.
Wow, they really did just get everybody, huh?
Yeah, apparently. She also guest starred on St. Elsewhere, Cagney and Lacey, and ER, to name only a few others. She was a recurring character on several soap operas, including Days of Our Lives, Knots Landing, and a show called Hunter. And most recently, in 2015, she guest starred in a role in the remake of Hawaii Five-0. So I thought
cool.
that was pretty cool.
We live a long career. But yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, also, I just wanted to say before we get into our favorite lines, there was this guy, he was like from the Judge Advocate General Corps, and I keep getting emails about them because I'm in law school, and I've been seriously considering joining this like Judge Advocate General Corps.
But do it for MASH fandom. Like, do it so you can be part of a MASH institution now.
No, it's like a really, really cool program. So honestly, if we have other law students out there, think about it. So I mentioned that because my favorite line came when this Judge Advocate General came to the camp to like interview Radar and Chunhee, and he comes up to Henry, and Henry's introducing the people around him, and he goes, "Lieutenant, this is Captain Pac, ROK, and this is Lieutenant Mulcahy, GOD." And I thought that was hysterical.
Pretty good. I don't know what ROK stands for.
Republic of Korea.
Okay, cool. Love that. My favorite line is also a Henry line, as they tend to be. It was when the cow comes in, and Radar shows up at Henry's tent as Henry's freaking out, and he just goes, "Holy cow!" And then Henry responds, "Never mind his religion, Radar. Just get him out of here." It's so good. Like, again, that is the kind of line that I picture Henry coming up with, like, a week before and, like, waiting for a weird situation to use it.
Henry is just too much. He is so funny.
He's all of our dads.
So, Ethan, what is your martini rating for this episode?
Okay. So this is a very solid episode, but it did not blow me away. I think I'm gonna have to give this like the solid 3 out of 5 martinis. Pretty up there. No, maybe 3.5. I was maybe being a little too harsh, but solid enough. How about you?
So this is actually a 4 for me.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, like, if objectively it's a 4 or like in my heart it's a 4, but definitely I'm just like I was really feeling this episode. Like, I watched it not that long ago, and then I watched it again and I liked it even more. So definitely a 4 for me, even though that's kind of like weird for me to say. I don't know. This one has just a special place in my heart.
Hey man, there is no objectivity in critiquing media. It's all
this
how
is
we
our
feel.
podcast.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want.
So, with all that said, just to wrap up, we'd like to thank Jacob Friar-Balco for being our technical consultant, Vanessa's sister, Melissa, for our awesome cover art, and, of course, our listeners. Our music, social media, and contact for the show are linked in the description, as always, and join us next week for our discussion of Season 2, Episode 20, As You Were. But until then, question a cow's religion. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Bye, everyone.